Good morning. Welcome.
Just let me know, Emily, when you want me to start, and I will.
We've currently got about 52 people in the room. We're expecting closer to 80, so we'll just give a few more minutes.
Give it another minute or two. Yeah.
People to enter.
Well, we've got a little bit of flex now, haven't we?
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, it seems to have stabilized a little bit, so we could start and then people could always join a little bit late.
Okay, shall I kick off? Right.
Yes, please, Phil.
Welcome everyone. It's good to see so many of you here to this webinar on the Interim Devon Carbon Plan. My name's Phil Norrey. I'm Chief Executive of Devon County Council, and I also chair the Devon Climate Emergency Response Group, which has been meeting now, I think, Doug, for it's over 18 months, isn't it? I think nearly 2 years.
That's right. Yeah.
We've got quite a lot to get through in an hour, so we'll keep it fairly pacey. I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping at the start. First of all, if you've got questions or comments that you want to make at any time, please use the chat facility, which you'll see in the usual fashion on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, probably about in the middle of that, to put up any questions or comments that you've got, and we'll pick those up throughout the course of the meeting, probably largely in the question and answer session, which we're due to have at about 20 to 1, but please feel free to engage. We want this to be an interactive session as much as possible. I think most of you will have had the opportunity to have a look at the agenda, which is up on the screen now, and that gives you an outline of the session, which starts with the background to the climate emergency, which I think we're all familiar with, then an introduction to the plan, and then just covering the opportunities that are open to organisations in relation to the plan and what organisations are currently doing. We'll have a webinar poll on some selected questions after that, and then we'll open it up and have a question and answer session before wrapping up with the next steps. So before we actually get in, we were due to have Emma Page from Exeter University sharing the experiences of the university in relation to the plan, but unfortunately Emma can't be with us this morning, so we will use the time wisely, and so we've got a lot to get through in any case. But before we start with the agenda itself, I'd just like to ask Emily and Doug to introduce themselves and then hand over to Emily to kick us off.
Great, thank you very much, Phil. So I'm Emily Reid, and I'm the Devon Climate Emergency Project Manager, so helping to coordinate the work of the partnership.
And good morning, everybody. I'm Doug Eltham. I work for Devon County Council. I work in the Environment Group at Devon County Council. Could we just clarify, I noticed that Emma Page is on the call. Emma, will you be in a position later on in the webinar to discuss what the university is up to with its net zero target?
I certainly will.
Oh, that's great. I'm sorry, Emma.
I slipped through when you weren't looking, Phil.
Yeah. So your absence was exaggerated. That's really good news. Excellent. Would you like to introduce yourself formally?
Certainly. I'm Emma Page. I work for University of Exeter. I am tasked to develop the environment and climate emergency and actually bring to life the plans for net zero and actually see them delivered. So from the point of view of today's call, very much in keeping with, I think, the theme and the agenda.
Fantastic. It's really great to have you on board. So over to you, Emily.
Great, thank you, and pleased to have Emma here. So just to really clarify, the purpose of today's webinar is to introduce organisations to how the plan has come about, the key points and opportunities in the plan for organisations to know about, as Phil said, and an opportunity to ask questions. And the other webinars will give more detailed information by theme. So to introduce the partnership, the Devon Climate Emergency has 3 objectives: to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050 at the latest, and I'll discuss a little bit more later what net zero means specifically for organisations, but the target for 2050 at the latest is for the whole geography of Devon, and to improve the resilience of Devon's environment, because we will be experiencing some climate change still, and Devon's landscapes need to be made more prepared for that, as do Devon's communities. So the final objective is to prepare our communities for a warmer world and the effects of that. The partnership is public authorities as well as private and community organisations. So you can see the logos of the partnership on the right there. So a good spread of Devon's organisations, including all of the local authorities in Devon, Torbay and Plymouth included. And this partnership of organisations drives the strategy and the purpose of the project. So one of the first things that the partnership did back in May 2019 was to develop a Devon Climate Declaration, which they've all signed. And the principal commitments of this are a willingness to lobby for the required national policy changes to enable Devon to do what it needs to do, and also the resources to do that, and a commitment by the organisations to review their own carbon emissions and their plans to reduce those emissions within 6 months of signing the declaration to meet or exceed the United Nations IPCC targets, and to collaborate on the production and implementation of a Devon carbon plan, which they've been doing for a good amount of time now. As you can now see, we'd like to get your feedback on that plan, and also to collectively review the community risks to a warmer world. We'd encourage all organisations in Devon to sign up to this declaration, and you can do so on the website there. The link is there, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that actually means for organisations later. So the partnership organisations meet at CEO director level in the response group to drive the strategy, and the tactical group is really a forum to allow for more detailed discussion between organisations in the delivery of the strategy, with officers meeting to share organisational updates and progress. There are 2 work streams, both the mitigation, so to reduce emissions, and also adaptation, so helping to adapt our communities to the inevitable climate changes. So the Net Zero Task Force is a volunteer expert task force of 15 individuals who are invited by the response group to develop the Devon Carbon Plan. And the adaptation workstream is headed by the Climate Impacts Group, which is chaired by Helen Dobby from the Environment Agency, and is working to develop a adaptation plan. The Climate Impacts Group is working regionally, which reflects many of the regional nature of the key bodies involved, such as the Local Resilience Forum and the Environment Agency. So it's actually a Devon, Cornwall and Isles of Scilly adaptation plan that will be developed. The Interim Devon Carbon Plan went through an evidence gathering phase, including a public call for evidence, a youth parliament, and some thematic meetings. And we had almost 900 submissions of evidence from the public, which was fantastic, and we hope is reflected, you'll see, in the plan. And because of the pandemic, we've had to delay the Citizens' Assembly, which we hoped would have taken place by now. And so the plan, you'll see, is offering suggested actions on the less controversial topics, but is also suggesting issues which merit further deliberation by a Citizens' Assembly next year. And then after which, once we've had the input of the Citizens' Assembly, the plan can be amended to reflect the outcomes of that. So the plan is for everyone in the geography of Devon and focuses on the strategic issues, but it also nests with national plans, and more detail will be given by district plans and organisational plans. So the plan recommends what needs to be done to reach net zero, the trajectory to meet net zero by 2050 at the latest, and the costs, opportunities and co-benefits of reaching net zero by 2050. We also want to hear during the consultation period from organisations and individuals in Devon about their opinion on the date that net zero should be achieved by. The plan outlines the challenges of trying to achieve net zero before the national timetable of 2050, for example, 2030 or 2040, such as the fact that some infrastructure is national. For example, the date when diesel and petrol cars will no longer be sold by. And this is a specific consultation question, the date, so please do dig into the detail and have a think about that. The plan makes clear that net zero can't be achieved within existing resources and policy. We know that there is an investment opportunity, but there's also a gap which will require national and philanthropic funding. And the funding status for each action is described. There are also significant opportunities for private and community investment, which we'll discuss in a bit more detail later. And the plan reflects the geographic nature of Devon, predominantly rural, and the actions will differ by place. Some will be more suitable for towns and some will be more suitable for Devon's more rural communities. And this is also indicated in the plan. So there are a range of co-benefits to achieving net zero. It will help us reach many of our other objectives for Devon's health and well-being, such as reducing fuel poverty and the benefits of a more active lifestyle. There's opportunities for our prosperity, such as energy security and creating new jobs and skills, and also for the environment by increasing our resilience, such as reducing flood risk. So I'll hand back to Phil now. Thank you.
Okay, I shall start my video. Yeah, thanks very much, Emily. The next few slides set out some of those broader opportunities for organisations, which Emily's just alluded to, setting out a number of the sort of practical propositions that we're including in the plan and those benefits. So we clearly want the Heart of the Southwest area to be a centre of expertise in low carbon buildings. We know at the moment that our housing stock is not good and that there's a huge opportunity through this programme of both improving the environmental efficiency, energy efficiency of our housing stock, but also making them better places to live. And we allude to the benefits, the significant benefits in terms of fuel poverty and better housing, and the economic opportunities that present themselves by having to do retrofitting on that sort of scale. I think I probably don't have to go through, but it's a very significant opportunity and something where if we can get some kind of economic edge, it would really help. So I'm happy to move on to the next slide now, Emily. So the whole of the buildings issue is critical. Transport is obviously a really important one for us. We're a peripheral area, and to some extent we've struggled through things like distance to market as a result of the current model of operation in terms of logistics, and I think the next phase of the green industrial revolution presents us with a fantastic opportunity to turn that round. So first of all, our digital infrastructure is going to be critical to that, and that presents a huge opportunity for organisations, not only in terms of their local impact but also global reach. The reinvigoration of our town centres, because they become different sorts of places, probably linked also to changing patterns in relation to retail behaviour, also means that we can reinvent a lot of our places to make them more people friendly and better places to live. Active travel, I'm sure many of us are enthusiasts for that, but actually we need to move away from the current model of relying on the car and into other ways of travel, which is significantly improving our health, and the infrastructure required to support changing fuel for vehicles also provides a major opportunity. And again, we want to be right at the front of the queue on that. So the health opportunities are absolutely critical. We know that we've got an underactive population. We know that we've got high levels of obesity and some chronic diseases which are related to a lack of physical activity, such as diabetes. And I probably don't need to go on about those, but we know that there is a more healthy lifestyle to be had living in a more energy efficient world. So happy to move on to the next slide now, Emily. Resources and our economy, again, I sort of referred to that sort of distance to market, but as an economy, there's huge potential in Devon for us to be more circular and to use resources that we've already used once on numerous occasions, but also to ensure that we source as much of our products as locally as possible, and that the distance travelled is reduced, but a circular economy that uses waste in a different way, I think, also creates significant employment opportunities, and the use of sustainable materials locally, I think, again, an advantage. It's what our ancestors did. A lot of the land was used very productively for renewable resources. People didn't throw things away. They reused them as much as possible. It was just the way that people lived, and we then developed into a throwaway society using carbon-based products which were cheap, plentiful and flexible, but actually hugely wasteful and detrimental to the long-term health of the planet. And if we can return to our former habits, all the better. And the retaining more locally, I've alluded to, really important for us in Devon because we've got such a rich resource of sustainable materials here. So happy to move on to the next slide, Emily. Wait for that one to come up. Oh, have I frozen out?
Potentially. Can you see the slide on food? Would you like me to pick that up, Phil, or can you see the?
I think Phil's dropped out, Emily, so that might be helpful if you could run through this one.
Okay, I'll run through this slide. So there's also huge opportunities for something we're very good at in Devon, so high quality local food production. processing and supply, and also the associated services to farming, such as independent farming advice and other land and marine opportunities, such as seizing corporate carbon offset market opportunities, and to do with forestry, such as forestry enterprise zones. And then more broadly, finance and skills opportunities. There's going to be new finance products, such as green investment products, and a very broad range of opportunities for reskilling the workforce to redeploy into low carbon sectors, from AI to opportunities with electric vehicles and accreditation for carbon sequestration. I think Phil's rejoining the room, but it might take him a moment.
I did warn. I was just illustrating the importance of better digital connectivity by mine failing, as I predicted it would. Unfortunately, as it unfortunately does on Zoom. But yes, I'm happy,
No.
Emily, if you've moved on.
We did, yeah, we did
on.
cover that slide for you, I'm afraid, Phil. So I'll just click on.
No, that's brilliant. No, I'm really sorry about that. Yeah. So are we on to the foods?
We've done the food
slide.
And I think we're inviting Emma in now to share a case study.
Fab. Brilliant. That makes great sense, and sorry to everyone for that. Thank you very much for covering, Emily.
Emma, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So in terms of what does this mean for you? What does this mean for organizations? And what's it all about? How do you start? How do you make that next leap into what this plan will do for you? I can talk in terms of what it means to the university and the sort of plans and programs we're making. So from our point of view, the plan helps us bring together organizations where we can work together on shared agenda. So we have examples of this through the Southwest Climate Action Network, where different departments from the university are working together across Devon and Cornwall to look at what we can do together in terms of shared opportunities for development of new technology, investigation research that could be climate leading, solutions in terms of best practice, but also working together on sort of those difficult issues. So it brings the opportunity to share ideas, to actually collaborate across the university with some of the researchers and the academics, and also to enable some of our students to get involved in real world problems. This can have benefits for the region. It also gives us practical solutions that we can deploy across the region and be the first, if you like, the leaders of enabling that change, understanding those practical next steps. And those practical next steps help us make that move forward. So from the point of view of working with businesses, we can start working with community groups, with local councils, building networks together, and actually not just doing studies and research that could be very academic, but also taking those practical next steps of the solutions in terms of real world problems for Devon, for Cornwall. What does this mean? It looks at where we can identify the carbon footprint of the operations. It looks at how we can support those businesses, understand the solutions for things that we procure every day. So not just the university opportunities to buy low carbon, but creating those solutions for other people to buy them too. So we've done some detailed research, and we have some additional resources that we can share on those where we've worked with businesses. But it also helps us be able to understand and develop students' career opportunities. So we have partnerships, we work with organizations to deliver activities that help their projects, their dissertations, and actually gives back more information to the businesses about what they're doing. We had one in the summer that talked very much about travel, looking at the travel for Devon during the lockdown, pre-lockdown, and also post-lockdown, looking at how the different travel patterns influence the air quality, but also behaviours and how people reacted to the lockdown will inform our decisions on how we deploy further initiatives that are identify those walking, cycling routes, or where best to identify where our major network problems are. And as a result of understanding what happens before and after, we learn and we can replicate. Our carbon net zero plan, the one that the university is deploying, looks very much at a structured approach of specific initiatives, identifying how we can track and monitor change and how we can bring them to life in terms of case studies. So we've looked at how we can produce energy initiatives and share that as a best practice from the point of view of solar panels, EV charging points. How do they work? Are they accessible? What are the tips or the tricks that enable us to make that really viable for our staff, and also how we then might use that or share that in terms of practice. We've also looked at waste management, composting, different solutions to our waste, talking about circular economy. If we can't measure it, we can't manage it. So looking at how we can understand where it goes, how it gets treated, and what opportunities there might be for the Southwest to really explore those gaps in the market, identify what the solutions for the future might be. We've also looked, I've talked about travel, we've also looked at different procurement options, how we can support our supply chain, understand their carbon footprint, understand what it means to their suppliers and other people they supply to. And as a result, maybe provide that additional awareness. And this comes back to us being able to look at carbon and climate literacy for all. We're building climate literacy into our own courses and across the whole of our university, from the council right the way through down to our students, providing a way of bringing to life the individual action that we can take. The carbon plan for us covers all aspects of our footprint, from everything we do and everything we see. And improving our data to be able to monitor that and be able to bring it to life helps us be able to build that information and that ability to inform others and give other people shared learning. That evidence-based decision-making helps us understand, what does it really cost? How does it really need to be deployed? What are the advantages and the problems associated with that? We don't want to be able to create more problems down the chain for our supply chain or for other people by having great ideas. So looking at scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions is really integral to how we build that integration with our colleagues, with our communities, but also with other businesses. So we see the Carbon Action Plan, the Devon plan, being instrumental in opening up those partnerships, being able to bring other organisations in to further that knowledge sharing, to be pivotal, I suppose, in the next step to finding the solutions. So it's more than just a university plan, it's a regional plan and part of the Devon plan. And we understand it's going to make a real difference, and that's what we're aiming for. I've given very headline information about what we do, about how we brought it to life. I can share more information if you need it, so please do ask, or please do email me, and we'll share some of the information from our Southwest Climate Action Network guys. We'll also be able to put you in touch with other parts of the university that can actually do this much more justice than I can today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emma. That's really, really helpful. And it's great to know that the university is doing so much on so many fronts. And I think what's been demonstrated over the past few months, come home very quick, very signally to me, is when we are faced with a genuine emergency and we need to do something about it, organisations can change almost overnight. And we've seen that in relation to COVID. We've been able to redeploy resources and redirect effort and work in a different way, in a way that people didn't really think was imaginable before. We've challenged some patterns of behaviour. Some of the active travel schemes we've put in have kind of tested public appetite for doing things differently, and in a very short space of time doing things that would have taken ages for us to get through. I think we need to take that forward into the next stage once we've emerged from the COVID pandemic emergency phase. Actually, in our recovery from that, really take on some of those disciplines and apply them to the carbon agenda. So that's my little sermon and rant over anyway. So I will hand over now to Emily for the webinar poll.
And there's one more slide before.
There's one more. Sorry, it's before we. Yeah, it's one more slide. Sorry, we'll carry on. We've got one.
Totally fine. So I think hearing from Emma there was just a great example of how one of our partner organisations, Exeter University, has developed their own plans, looking at their own organisational reach and emissions, and is also providing resources for other organisations, so that collectively we can share this knowledge that we need. So just to remind you, I did mention the Devon Climate Declaration earlier, but just to remind you what that would actually mean if your organisation was to sign up for that. It's a willingness to ask national government for the policy changes and resources that we need as a county and a geography to fulfil on our net zero target, and also to review your own organisational emissions, as Emma has outlined you might do, and also collaborate with others to implement a Devon-wide net zero target, and to look to your community and the kind of risks that they might encounter as a result of climate change. So the Interim Devon Carbon Plan does also propose a net zero target for organisations to be net zero by 2030. So that is saying that organisations could be net zero ahead of the wider geography. So what does that actually mean? Well, organisations have the opportunity to, we feel, to balance their outgoing emissions with opportunities to lock down carbon through things like tree planting or the restoration of carbon sequestering, carbon drawing down habitats in Devon such as peat bogs. So net zero just means the balancing of emissions produced such as carbon dioxide or methane with any opportunities to draw down emissions from the atmosphere such as tree planting. And organisations differ to a wider geography in that they can also engage in carbon offset markets. So offsets are accredited means of paying for someone else to create the drawing down of emissions from the atmosphere that wouldn't have otherwise happened. For example, paying a farmer to increase tree planting on their land that they wouldn't have otherwise done. So organisations may be able to achieve net zero sooner than the wider geography because they can personally invest in offset markets as well as reducing emissions at source. So I also want to highlight the fact that we recognise that organisations are very diverse in Devon, and they do also include, importantly, community organisations who are vital for engaging their communities and supporting them and enabling them in understanding what this means, and also for developing the local skills and infrastructure for people to be empowered to make the changes they need. Emma has spoken of resources for organisations, and we will be signposting to a variety of resources so that we can pull them all together in one place on our website increasingly as time goes on. So do keep your eye out on our website. Great, so I'll go on to do the poll now. This is just to get a sense of who's in the room and what the appetite for achieving net zero already is in the room. So I'm going to launch the polling. Can you nod if you can see that? Great. So, or we can see some voting happening already. Fantastic. Almost everyone voted. There's a few people who haven't. I'll give you another minute or two. Great, well, the voting is stabilising, so I'll end the poll and share the results. So there's a really encouraging result there that that 59% of the participants in the webinar already have a net zero target. So that's fantastic. And an additional 21% of the room has plans to do so. So that's really encouraging to hear that we are all doing this together. So we've got some other questions for you. So, second question. Okay, a few more people to vote still. Voting seems to have stabilised. Oh, one or two more. Great, that's most of you, so I will end the poll, share the results. Okay, so that's interesting to see that many people's plans are still under development. So 17% of the room has a plan in place to achieve net zero, but 63% of the room is still developing the plan. And I think there's a great opportunity here for you to dig into the detail of the Interim Devon Carbon Plan and use it as a resource to develop your own plans. So one more question. Great, so almost all of you voted. Just give you a few more seconds to cast your vote. Great, that's most people. So again, only 8% of the room are using carbon offset mechanisms already. 52% are not considering using them, and 40% are considering using them. So again, you may find discussion of carbon offsets in the plan interesting, and I will highlight as well, there is a separate report by Exeter University shared on our website on carbon offsets if you want to get into the detail of what is involved and assurances about them. Great, so that's really interesting to see, thank you.
Good stuff. I think that's concluded the webinar poll. Thank you, Emily. And we're going to move now into the Q&A, and we've already seen there have been quite a few questions and comments in the chat, which I know Doug's been assiduously monitoring on our behalf. So we'll do our best to pick those up in this session, and also invite Emma to join Emily, myself, and Doug to respond. So Doug, I don't know whether you want to fire away with the comments and questions, and we'll pick them up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Phil. There's been a good amount of chat going on. I'm really pleased to see some people in the community answering other people's questions as well, which is wonderful. There are some fairly straightforward ones to answer, and there are some fairly challenging.
I have those, yeah.
Well. So the first fairly straightforward one that I can answer is from Peter Hales. What does anchor institution procurement mean? We've mentioned that a couple of times this morning.
Yeah.
So anchor institutions are essentially the organisations that are unlikely to leave Devon. They're here for the long term, and they generally have fairly large budgets for commissioning services and buying goods. And we can get much better value by doing that if we think about how we can use that money locally, and particularly in supporting community organisations to provide services back to those organisations, so we get that cyclical economic benefit. So that's what
just to give a live example of that, we're working very hard with the procurement office in the cabinet office, team in the cabinet office, on a Southwest hub procurement strategy whereby effectively the public sector engages to buy as much of its food from local sources as possible. That's really exciting. I've just written to Michael Gove and Alok Sharma to get that expedited. There's a lot of support from the Crown Procurement Service for it.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Perhaps one for Emily from Victoria Hatfield is, can residents request to join the Citizens' Assembly?
Great, thank you. The short answer is you can't request to join the Citizens' Assembly, because what we're trying to do is to create a sample of people that reflect Devon's demographics. So we will be sending out thousands of letters to across Devon and inviting people to join the Citizens' Assembly, and then we will select a group of people that gives a good distribution of, for example, different ages, rural, urban, different parts of Devon. And so you need to keep an eye out for that letter coming through your door and respond if it comes through your door. But people can't self-select because we want a really representative group of people.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Right, question from Catherine Causley. How will we influence buying behaviour on such a large scale? And this was supplemented by Peter Smith, who had a follow-up question, which was, you know, how do we move people away from the Amazon culture? Perhaps Emily, would you like to have a go answering that one?
Yeah, thank you. So, of course, there are emissions associated both directly with activities within Devon. So, for example, farming that happens in Devon, but also some of our food and products originate outside of Devon and become imported into Devon. And so we have consumption emissions as well as production emissions. So there's a range of actions in the plan to address this, from awareness. So that would include various public engagement campaigns, as well as things like anchor institution procurement actions, so that organisations are helping people to reduce the emissions associated with their consumption. So there's sort of lots of different angles that it is approached from.
Okay, thank you, Emily. There are quite a few questions on the behaviour change and the social shift topic. Isabel Carlisle has a question regarding what is the strategy for building collective will for behaviour change, and specifically, are there opportunities opening up for civil society organisations? Phil, do you feel you can come in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. On the whole sort of behavioural thing is really interesting, and we've actually learned a lot through the COVID experience, we're still learning. I think it's fair to say, about how you start to change behaviour patterns in a population which has been used to pretty much suiting itself and getting what it wants as quickly as it wants it and having it now. And some of the techniques that are currently being used that have come out of behavioural insight research really important. So I think it touched on one or two of the points I saw made in the chat, that the closer you can get to people's real lived experience and sort of authenticity and relevance with your messaging, the better. So what doesn't work is sort of grand, sort of blanket public information campaigns, however you conduct them, even if you try to use social media. The things that really work are sort of much more precisely targeted at things that matter to people in their individual places, and the feedback loop is relatively tight. So I think we've got to learn from that experience to start to influence people. And of course, it's some of it is actually seeing the difference that can be made in places. And again, we've done that. Just thinking of some of the active travel schemes that have been put into place during the first phase of the pandemic and a little bit after that. Huge amount of resistance. No, you can't close that road. We don't want you to do that. That's going to be the end of the world as we know it. Actually, to find that after a while, people actually quite like it. Actually improves business for some local shops because people find it just a more unpleasant environment to be in, and so just beginning to demonstrate the impacts of positive change as well, I think is really important. Absolutely, civil society is key to this. I mean, all we can do as the public institutions, I think, in regard to a lot of this, is to provide the framework, whether that's a legislative, regulatory framework, or our behaviour as organisations. But ultimately, it's going to be down to individuals working at the local level, acting in a way that makes sense to them in their places, that will change how we live our lives, not what we say as big institutions. So the more that civil society can do in this space, the better, working within the framework of the Devon plan, but absolutely free to innovate and do things differently and work with local communities.
Thank you, Phil. I think Emma Page would like to come on this one as well. Emma, you're muted.
Rookie mistake.
There you go.
So there's a couple of points, just actually working with procurement and also about behaviour change. So there may not be the kind of products and services that we need that are low carbon alternatives ready and available today. That doesn't necessarily mean we can't ask for them. It doesn't mean that we can't set that to our buying frameworks in organisations, but also an individual choice to make a decision not to do something. So from the point of view of removing desk bins underneath everyone's desk and actually creating more segregated waste, from actually collaborating with partner organisations to say, we're interested in this, we want to start those trials and pilots, we're going to look into this, work with us on it, and actually create change we want to see. And that's where we come to those opportunities, we create those opportunities. And I wanted to talk about the lockdown and what happened in lockdown. We were all required to buy sanitizer, to buy hand wipes, to buy more plastic, to actually create screens, to change the way we were doing things. There were many, many benefits in terms of maybe reduced travel, maybe the opportunity to reduce some of the footprint that we had and have maybe always worked with people face to face. Suddenly we were working online. Changing those behaviours, changing different footprint, also gave us the opportunity to buy things different too. But we reacted rather than responded. But within that reaction, there's nothing to say we need that sanitizer now, but the next time we're going to buy it, we're going to buy just enough for now, but the next time we're going to buy it, we're going to buy something that is more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, because the market's not ready. But we can start asking that question. We can work with our supply chain and we can say that we have a preference for this. In the past, some of the projects, some of the examples that I think we can work together on is maybe a Devon award, whereby we actually positively, actively encourage our supply chain to meet those goals and for us to be able to all sponsor, support and encourage them to do so, and actually then support them with making that change and stopping buying the plastic, stopping the large organisations that we know and love, keep providing those single-use, non-recyclable plastic cups, those little things that make step changes. there are things that we can do together, and there are very many communities that I know have already made the move to ban plastic, to ban certain types of bag, to be able to make it really work. And it's really about, you know, if we're looking at the Devon plan, we're looking at a club, we're looking at a community that actually wants to sponsor different things and actually do things differently, and to work together, work through those solutions. And I think that's where we have the strength. I've got a couple of examples that I can maybe talk to you guys offline off if you have any questions about those. But the education, the behaviour change starts with us setting the principles of what we don't want to do, and then actually making it really easy for us to do them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emma. There's a follow-on question that relates to this from Matthew Charlton and Leslie Crawford picked up on this as well. The question is, until we have government legislation, surely this is all a hopeful wish. Well, we've picked up there that there's actually a lot of things that we can be doing ahead of the government legislation. But do any of the panel have thoughts on where government legislation might be particularly effective?
And a whole range of things. I mean, one of the things that we responded to as a climate emergency response group, and we're not there yet, but I think we really need to push hard on, is the planning framework. I think that was alluded to in the chat in terms of environmental standards for new build. And you know, part of our job, I think, as a collective effort in terms of the communities of Devon, is to lobby as hard as we can for change and to shout as loudly as we can. Some things are out with our control to ordain, but certainly they're not out with our control to influence. So I think we need to recognize, yeah, it's absolutely right. There are some things that without a national framework is going to be much more difficult. But I think if we just sat back and wrung our hands and say we can't do anything until the government changes, that's probably not the right thing to do. So we do everything within our power that we can, and we shout as loudly as we can to change government and to look at every consultation that comes out of government and bounce it back where we don't think it's, you know, and make our voices heard where we don't think it's making appropriate steps in relation to climate change and reducing carbon emissions. So I think it's a valid point, but I think we've got to try and take as much agency as we can, work with our MPs, who are ultimately the legislators, and do our best to influence those who are policymakers as well, to see the wider importance of this agenda.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I noticed time is ticking, but there's one more question that I think would be really good to tick off. Perhaps Emma Page, you could have a go at this one. It's from Peter Brown. Is carbon offsetting essentially cheating? That's the question for an organisation.
Fantastic question. Yes and no, which is difficult to say in one sentence. It is very clear that there is an awful lot of things that we need to do and can do that within our gift if we change our operations and the architecture of what we want to do and how we do it. That's not to be trite. That is a very big hurdle. And some of the things that we've done aren't supported by the infrastructure or by the location or by our suppliers at this current time. Things will change over time, and there will be an additional support from maybe the government, maybe from technology, to actually support a lower carbon economy. So we should reduce wherever we can, and that should be the priority. And then we should look at understanding what else we can do with others to be able to further look at alternatives. But then there will be the need to travel, the need to always buy things that support that university, that college, that business, that trip, that opportunity. So there will always be a footprint. We can't get away from that. So in terms of the last resort or the last thing to look at is offsetting. It's not a dirty word. There are very many positive and very natural environmental opportunities for offsetting, and maybe offsetting local or looking at environmental net gain or looking at those opportunities are really the next phase for what we want to do. The university hasn't fixed an approach for offsetting. We won't be doing that until we've looked at reducing everything we possibly can and working with all of our partners, with all of our community to be able to look at how we can do that. But then that next phase of what we can do locally to build environmental net gain would be the first approach for our offset. And that's where I would say there are schemes out there. Not all of them are made equal. There are some that are really credible, and there are some that to be aware of. And I'll probably leave it there for the moment. But in terms of that next step for offsetting, the university sector has got together and they are looking at developing an offsetting strategy, but also providing that guidance and that information. And as soon as that is available, I'm sure that will be made available to whomever wants to see it, because that will be a good publication for us all to read.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. Okay, back to you, Phil.
Yeah, great. Probably now time, given where we are on the clock, to wrap up. Say a really big thank you to everyone who's participated, in particular to Doug and Emily and Emma for their contributions and for the organisation of the event. I hope it's been helpful. We wanted to give you a framework today and an understanding of the kind of wider application of the plan. A plan isn't a plan. A plan, we've all seen plans over the years that haven't really come to anything. Our job really is to breathe life into this and for it to influence what happens on the ground as a real collective effort. The most important thing that we can do as a Devon community now for our future generation. So there'll be a lot more detail to follow. The plan itself is very rich, and Emily's outlined the processes that are going to follow from now on in. So just to encourage you to share the consultation through your networks, to complete it online, and both individually and support your organisations in preparing a response, and to also to attend the thematic webinars, which will go into the points that some of you have raised in the chat in more detail and give you the opportunity to discuss those things that particularly interest you in the themes. So I think we'd also encourage you to take advantage, not only say there's the webinar series up on the slides, but also to we're signposting you to the resources that are available through the Plymouth University Low Carbon Devon project, which hopefully again will be resources that you'd find really, really useful. And again, that's up on the last slide there. So I think we've just about hit the time, spot on at 1 o'clock. Thank you to everyone, and I hope you found that as valuable as I have, and thank you again.